Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the third debate of term at the Cambridge Union. It's nice to see so many people here for an exciting debate. Just to run through things very briefly, as I'm sure many of you are sort of bored of me explaining the rules nowadays. There'll be 6 paper speakers this evening. Each of them have about 10 minutes to speak. We have a speech from the proposition, then the opposition, then a round of floor speeches. This is where you guys, the students, get to get involved and make a short speech for about 2 minutes. We have a floor speech prize this evening. That is a bottle of house wine from the orator. So the best speech this evening will be selected at the end. Feel free to come up and sort of let the orator staff know or save it for another day when you sort of fancy a glass of wine. We also have points of interest, and that's when somebody is saying something, if you sort of disagree or want to sort of ask a question, raise your hand, just say on that point of information, and it's within sort of the prerogative of the speakers to accept. The motion before the House this evening is, this House believes British democracy has failed. The first speaker for the proposition is Harri Kandel. Harri is a first-year student studying land economy at Gonville and Keys and accepted the opportunity to speak this evening just an hour before the debate started. So thank you very much to Harri. You have the ears of the House.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the House, what truly sets British democracy apart from regimes where leaders rule unchecked? If our elected officials can govern without meaningful scrutiny or opposition, are we still living in a democracy, or are we witnessing a dangerous concentration of power? Today, I'm here to argue that British democracy has failed. This system, which should reflect the power to the people, by the people, and for the people, is no longer fit for purpose. Our democracy should serve the public, protect freedoms, and ensure accountability. Instead, it's increasingly serving the interests of a few. Firstly, let's talk about the first-past-the-post system. Democracy is supposed to reflect the will of the people. Yet, first-past-the-post distorts that will in ways that are deeply undemocratic. The 2024 general election is a perfect example. Labour won a majority of 412 seats, the largest in 25 years, with just 33.8% of the votes. Think about that. Over 2/3 of this country did not vote for them. Yet, they control an overwhelming majority of seats in Parliament. This system is fundamentally unproportional. In the 2019 general election, the Lib Dems received 11% of the vote, but yet secured only 1.7% of the seats. And let's not forget UKIP's performance in 2015. With 12.6% of the vote, they only won 1 seat. This leaves millions of voters without a voice in Parliament, reducing elections to a game of chance for smaller parties. How is this democracy? Where is the equal representation?
More information?
Please.
It's quite a long jump to say that we have an unfair electoral system, therefore the entirety of democracy has failed. That seems to be a very hyperbolic claim, especially given a large majority of people do not live in a world with free and fair elections at all.
I'm getting on to more points. So this is my first point, electoral systems. And also, people live in countries such as Russia who vote, and yet is that democratic? Is the Russian public who vote in democratic elections, their vote is not counted, is it? So if you vote, it does not mean that you are a resemblance of a democratic institution. Thank you. This growing disproportionality also fuels voter apathy. When people feel their voices do not count, they stop voting altogether. Since 2001, we have seen a constant decline in voter turnout, reflecting the public's diminishing trust in our political institutions. Can we call this a healthy democracy when people are frequently disengaged, when millions of votes are wasted? Secondly, there's a lack of accountability in the executive branch, and this is where democracy is truly failing. With Labour's massive majority of 412 seats, the government now faces very little opposition in Parliament. Where is the scrutiny? When a party holds such a large majority, the House of Commons becomes nothing more than a rubber stamp for executive decisions. What does this mean for the checks and balances that are supposed to keep power in check? We saw this dynamic before with Tony Blair's Labour government in 1997, which used similarly large majorities to push through the controversial Iraq War, despite significant opposition from public and Parliament. And In the case of the police crime and sentencing courts bill, which severely limits the rights to protest, we saw a majoritarian government abuse its power to curb civil liberties. This bill can now stop protests for causing simply an annoyance. In fact, it reminds us of Lord Helsham's concept of an elective dictatorship, when a government is elected but wields unchecked power. Now I ask you, is this any different from authoritarian regimes where leaders face little to no opposition? What separates us when our government can pass legislation without real scrutiny, with minimal pushback from Parliament?
Please.
The Labour Party won the 2005 election, so how can you say that it was, an unchecked?
They won with a disproportionate electoral system, which is my point. Thank you. What's worse is the fact that this subverts the will of the people to choose their leaders. We've had 3 successive Conservative Prime Ministers in recent years, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, neither of whom had a direct mandate from the public. They governed on the basis of party support rather than public approval. Is that what the people voted for? Was the mini-budget what you voted for? No. Or is it another example of a system that fails to reflect the public's will? Thirdly, majoritarian governments, as we've seen...
Please.
So when you're talking about first past the post, you're voting for your MP, you're not voting for the party leader. Of course it's going to be unproportional at some points.
Yeah, you're not voting for party leader, but you're voting for the party, so my point still remains, because the party leader will be the Prime Minister, and still yet Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak does not have a public mandate. And increasingly the British democracy is becoming a presidential system. People do not vote for the basis of their constituent, for the basis of their MP, but for the basis of who is the party leader. Thirdly, majoritarian governments, as we've seen, have the power to erode sorry, I've repeated that point. We've also seen how governments with large majorities, like Blair's and now Labour's in 2024, have the ability to push through contentious policies with minimal resistance. What happens when this unchecked power is used to infringe on more of our rights, to pass more restrictive legislation? Is this the democracy we aspire to? In conclusion, Mr. President, members of the House, British democracy is indeed failing. It is on a period of decline. The first past the post system distorts representation, leaving millions without a voice. The executive branch now operates with minimal accountability, undermining the very principle of power to the people. And majoritarian governments can and do abuse their overwhelming power to curtail individual liberties. I leave you with this. If democracy is truly power to the people, by the people, and for the people, is this the system we have today? Can we, in good consciousness, call this a democracy? Or is it something much more troubling? A system where power is concentrated in the hands of a few, unchecked and unchallenged, with voices of the many silenced. I urge you to support this motion. British democracy has failed. Thank you.